Emma Chen adjusted her modest black dress for the third time as she waited in the marble-floored lobby of Sterling Enterprises. At 23, she had never set foot in a building this expensive, where even the elevator buttons seemed to gleam. With wealth she couldn't fathom. Miss Chen, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, approached. "Mr. Sterling will see you now." Emma's heart hammered as they rode to the 40th floor. She clutched her simple resume, knowing it was thin compared to what a billionaire CEO probably expected. But she needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were mounting, and her savings from her previous receptionist position were nearly gone. The office doors opened to reveal Alexander Sterling behind an imposing desk. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35. With sharp features and steel-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. His tailored suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. "Sit," he said without looking up from her resume. Emma perched on the edge of the leather chair, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "You have no experience with high-level executives," he stated flatly. "No, sir, but I'm a fast learner and extremely organized. I graduated summa cum laude, and why do you want this position?" His eyes finally met hers, and she felt pinned by their intensity. Emma could have given him a polished answer about career goals. Instead, honesty won out. "Because I need it. My mother is sick, and I need to support her. I'll work harder than anyone you could hire?" Something flickered across his face. "Most people lie in interviews. I don't see the point in lying to get a job I couldn't actually do well." For a long moment, he studied her. Then he stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. The position requires absolute discretion, loyalty, and the ability to handle situations that others might find morally ambiguous. Emma's stomach tightened. What kind of situations? He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Business is rarely clean, Miss Chen. Sometimes we must make difficult choices to protect what matters." She nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you?" His voice was soft but carried an edge that made her shiver. "I chose you because you're innocent, untainted by the cynicism that comes with experience. That innocence is valuable to me." Emma didn't fully understand what he meant, but she needed this job too much to ask questions. "When do I start?" 3 months into working for Alexander Sterling, Emma had learned to navigate his moods and anticipate his needs. She'd also learned to ignore the questionable phone calls, the meetings with men in expensive suits who spoke in code, and the occasional documents that made her stomach turn. Emma Alexander called from his office late one Thursday evening. "I need you to stay tonight." She found him loosening his tie, looking more human than the intimidating figure she'd first met. Working late had become routine, and she'd grown comfortable with these quiet hours when his usual coldness softened. "The Morrison contract needs to be finalized," he said, gesturing to a thick file on his desk. As they worked side by side, Emma became increasingly aware of his proximity. The way he leaned close to review documents, the subtle scent of his cologne, the occasional brush of his fingers against hers. "You've changed," he said suddenly, looking up from his laptop. "What do you mean? When you started, you blushed. Every time I spoke to you, now you argue with me about scheduling conflicts." His mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "I liked your innocence, but I find I prefer your confidence." Emma's cheeks warmed. "Mr. Sterling Alexander," he corrected, standing and moving closer. "We're alone, Emma." "We've been alone many nights." The air between them crackled with tension that had been building for weeks. Emma knew this was dangerous territory. He was her boss, a man who lived in a world she barely understood. But when he reached out to touch her face, she didn't pull away. "This is complicated," she whispered. "Everything worthwhile is complicated." His thumb traced her cheek. "But you make me want to be better than I am." When he kissed her, Emma felt her carefully constructed professional walls crumble. She had never been with anyone like Alexander Cumnan, intense and surprisingly gentle. That night, everything changed between them. As dawn broke over the city skyline, Emma lay in Alexander's arms on the leather sofa in his office. Knowing she had crossed a line she could never uncross, she had given him her innocence in every way that mattered. And she was terrified of what came next. For 6 weeks, Emma and Alexander maintained their secret relationship. By day, she was his efficient assistant. By night, she was something more, precious and fragile. He became gentler, more protective, and Emma began to see glimpses of the man beneath the ruthless exterior. But the business side of his life remained murky and troubling. "I need you to prepare these documents," Alexander said one morning, sliding a folder across her desk. And Emma, you never saw them? Inside were contracts that made her blood run cold. Money laundering schemes disguised as real estate investments. Payments to offshore accounts that she strongly suspected were bribes. Evidence of activities that could destroy lives. That evening, as they lay together in his penthouse apartment, Emma gathered her courage. "Alexander, what exactly does Sterling Enterprises do?" His body tensed against hers. "You know what we do? Corporate consulting. These contracts I've been handling, they're not just consulting." He sat up, his expression hardening. "Emma, there are things about my business you're better off not knowing. I'm already involved. I've been typing up contracts for illegal activities. If this comes out, it won't." His voice was sharp, final, and you won't discuss this again. For the first time since they'd become intimate, Emma saw the man who had intimidated her during that first interview. Cold, calculating, dangerous, 2 weeks later. Emma stared at the pregnancy test in the executive bathroom, her hands shaking as the second pink line appeared. She was 8 weeks pregnant with Alexander Sterling's baby, and she had never felt more alone or terrified. That same afternoon, federal agents arrived at Sterling Enterprises. Emma watched through the glass walls of Alexander's office as they placed him in handcuffs, his eyes finding hers across the room with an expression she couldn't read that within hours. The news broke. Alexander Sterling, arrested for fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The company was frozen, and Laceras. Emma's job disappeared along with any illusion she'd had about the man she'd fallen in love with, standing in her empty apartment that night. Emma placed a hand on her still flat stomach and made a decision that would change everything. Alexander Sterling could never know about this baby. 2 years had passed since Alexander's arrest. Emma had moved to a small town 3 hours from the city, using her savings to start over with a new identity. She worked as a bookkeeper for a local accounting firm and lived in a modest apartment above a bakery. Her daughter Lily had Alexander's gray eyes and dark hair. At 18 months old, she was walking and babbling, completely unaware that her father was serving a 5-year sentence in federal prison. Emma had followed the trial obsessively. Alexander had maintained his innocence, claiming he'd been set up by his business partners. Part of her wanted to believe him, but the evidence had been overwhelming. The man she'd loved was a criminal, and she'd made the right choice in disappearing. Emma, Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor, knocked. On her door, "There's a man downstairs asking about you." Emma's blood turned to ice. Through her window, she saw a black sedan parked outside the bakery. Her worst nightmare was coming true. She quickly packed a bag for herself and Lily, her hands shaking as she gathered essentials. They would have to run again, start over somewhere else, but as she reached for the door, heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs. Emma Chen. She froze. That voice deeper now and rougher, but unmistakable. Slowly she turned to face the man who had changed her life forever. Alexander Sterling stood in her doorway, thinner than she remembered. His expensive suits replaced by simple jeans and a black sweater. Prison had hardened his features, but those steel-gray eyes were exactly as she remembered. Alexander. Voice barely worked. "How did you—" "I got out early. Good behavior." His gaze moved past her to where Lily stood, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, staring at the stranger with curious eyes that mirrored his own. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Emma watched as realization dawned on Alexander's face, saw the exact moment he understood why she had vanished without a trace. "She's mine," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Emma stepped protectively in front of Lily. "You need to leave, Emma, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "How do you build your empire on criminal activities? How do you make me an accessory to your crimes? How I had to disappear and rebuild my entire life because of what you did." Alexander's jaw tightened. I was protecting you. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to keep you safe. Safe. Emma's voice rose. I was typing contracts for money laundering schemes. I was involved whether you wanted me to be or not. The evidence was planted. I was set up by my former partners to take the fall for their operation. His eyes were desperate now. I spent 2 years in prison for crimes I didn't commit, thinking about you every single day. Emma wanted to believe him. Despite everything, part of her still loved the man he'd been in those quiet late nights when it was just the two of them. But she had Lily to protect now. It doesn't matter anymore, she said quietly. We've built a life here, a safe life. Alexander stepped closer, his voice breaking. That's my daughter, Emma. I've lost 2 years with her already. Me lose the rest of her life? Emma stared at the newspaper article Alexander had given her, her hands trembling. The headline read, Sterling Partners arrested in federal fraud case, former CEO exonerated. Marcus Webb and David Kane were arrested. Last week, Alexander explained, sitting across from her in the small cafe, while Lily napped in her stroller. The FBI found evidence that they'd been using Sterling Enterprises as a front for their operation, while systematically framing me. Emma read the article twice, her mind reeling. This says they planted evidence in your office, manipulated contracts, everything. You saw everything that made you think I was guilty was part of their setup. Alexander's voice was quiet but intense. I couldn't tell you the truth then because I was under investigation. The FBI needed me to act normally while they gathered evidence. So when you said I was better off not knowing, I was trying to protect you from becoming a target. Webb and Kane were dangerous men, Emma. If they'd known you suspected anything, or that you meant something to me, they would have eliminated the threat. Emma felt 2 years of anger and fear crumbling. Why didn't you contact me after your arrest? Because I thought you'd be safer without me. I had no idea about Lily. His eyes moved to their sleeping daughter, and Emma saw the pain there. Hired a private investigator to find you after I was released. When he told me about her, his voice broke. I've missed so much. Lily stirred in her stroller, opening those familiar gray eyes. She looked at Alexander with the fearless curiosity of a toddler. Hi, little one, Alexander said softly, his voice full of wonder. Lily smiled and reached for him. And Emma watched as her daughter's father carefully took her tiny hand in his much larger one. What happens now? Emma asked. That's up to you. Alexander's eyes met hers. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know you've built a life here, and I have no claim to it. But Emma, I love you. I've never stopped loving you, and I want to be part of Lily's life, if you'll let me. Emma looked at this man who had been both her salvation and her destruction, who had given her the greatest gift of her life even as his world collapsed around them. She thought about the lonely nights, the fear, the constant looking over her shoulder, but she also thought about those quiet evenings in his office. The gentleness he'd shown her, the way he'd looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. It won't be easy, she said finally. There's a lot to rebuild, a lot of trust to earn back. Hope flickered in Alexander's eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back, if you'll give me the chance. Lily babbled happily, reaching for it. Both her parents and Emma realized that perhaps some things were worth the risk. Perhaps some people deserved a second chance at redemption. We'll start slow, she said, taking Alexander's hand as Lily gurgled contentedly between them. But yes, we'll try. For the first time in 2 years, Emma felt like she could finally breathe freely. Her story wasn't ending. It was just beginning again. Asterisk. The end. Asterisk. Asterisk. Like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. Let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.